Poster 7, poster 8. So f of 3 is going to be 1, 2, 3 as a negative 2. F of negative 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 is going to be at positive, positive 1. Okay, poster number 9, f of 2, 1, 2 is going to be at 3. Negative 1 is going to be at 1. 0 is going to be at 3. Poster 10, poster 11, f of 2, 1, 2 is going to be at 3. 1, 2, 3 is going to be at 3. 1, 2, 3, 4 is going to be at 4. And 6 does not exist. I believe I went over this one with you guys for the F's. This is poster number 13 for the G's. Poster number 14 for the H's. And that is everything. Here are your answers for the piecewise functions, L, T, E, A, U, Y, B, L, O, S. And this is the breakdown. Okay, so for today, we're going to go over functions, and function notations, domain range of a function, transformations of a function, and combination of a function. You guys do have a quizzes right here that you can go ahead and work on. Complete your Math Excel for week 2. It is due by Sunday at 11 p.m. Let's get started. This is your guided notes for today, and you can tell because I always label everything. It's either on the upper right hand corner or the or the right bottom corner. So this is week 2 Friday. I do have some videos here that you guys can watch if you want to catch up and kind of summarize everything that we've gone over. I have 3 questions right here that you need to work on. This is going to be your notes for today. This is the second page. And let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so examples 1A and 1B, copy this part down on your guided notes, okay? So example 1, I want to find f of 3a. So here is my equation. Anytime you see an x, you are going to replace a 3a in it. So f of 3a is equal to 3a squared plus 7, which is going to be, you need to distribute that square, 9a squared plus 7, and that is your answer. That was my little girl playing with a fan, so if you hear that in the background, I'm sorry. F of b minus 1 equals b minus 1 squared plus 7. You would have to FOIL this, so you have to do b minus 1 times b minus 1 plus 7. So FOIL stands for first, which is b times b, is b squared. Outer, b times negative 1, which is a negative 1b. Inner, negative 1 times b, which is a negative 1b. Last, positive 1 plus 7. Now you want to go ahead and combine like terms. So your answer is b squared minus 2b plus 8. And that is your answer. Okay, example 1C. This one's a little bit more complicated, so hopefully I'll do a good job explaining this one. So for C, you have this crazy looking thing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to break down this first function. So f of x plus delta x is going to give you, you need to replace, anytime you see an x here, you're going to replace it with x plus delta x. So I have x plus delta x squared plus 7. Okay? So let's go ahead and do this then. You have x plus delta x times x plus delta x plus 7. You would have to FOIL this. So your FOIL, F-O-I-L, is going to be of these two parentheses. So first is going to be x times x, which is x squared. Outer is x times delta x, so that's x delta x. Inner is going to be delta x times x, so that's also going to be x, delta x. And your last is going to be delta x times delta x, so that's a delta x squared. Make sure you combine like terms, so that gives you 2x delta x. So then bringing this all together, this is going to be equal to x squared plus 2x delta x plus delta x squared plus 7. And I'm just going to underline that because I'm going to be using that in a second. But I'm going to cast it aside right now. Next is you have a minus f of x. So if f of x is equal to x squared minus 7, you know your negative f of x is going to be the opposite of that. So that's going to be negative x squared minus 7. And I'm going to cast this part aside as well. And I'm just going to leave it there for now. Now that I have these two pieces together, I can go ahead and bring it all together then. So your first part is going to be x squared plus 2x delta x plus delta x squared plus 7. And then minus f of x, so that's going to be minus x squared minus 7, and then bring it all together all the way over delta x, and that delta x is right here. So don't forget your denominator. Now you get to go ahead and cancel some of the stuff here. So let's see, what can I cancel? I can cancel the 7 and the negative 7. I can cancel my x squared and my negative x squared, and I think that's all I can do. So then I have the following remaining. I have a 2x delta x plus delta x squared, which I can actually factor out a delta x. So I have 2x inside the parenthesis plus a delta x inside the parenthesis. I can now cancel the delta x with the numerator and the denominator. And all of this, my answer is going to be 2x plus delta x. Look how sexy and tiny that number is. You did all of this work to get to this perfect little number. Okay, so activity number 1. All right, let's talk about the different parent functions of transformations, okay? So if you have a square root, keep in mind that the shape of the graph is going to be a curve, okay? And you always start at 0, 0 because that's a parent function. You're not moving it up, down, left, right, or anything. You start at 0, 0. For an x squared, it's a parabola, so it's like a smiley face. And of course, if it's a negative x squared, it's like a downward sad face. X cubed, the parent function, is just kind of like a snake. It's like this little wiggly shape with arrows at the end. And then absolute value is a V shape. So these are the 4 different shapes. All right, now let's take a look at this. This is where the transformation comes in. If you have x minus c and they're in parentheses, the c right here determines whether you're going to go to the right or to the left. And it's always the opposite because it is in the parentheses. So if it's a negative c, a lot of people say, oh, left, because the negative x-axis is on the left. No, you got to do the opposite. So negative c means units to the right. Whereas positive c inside the parentheses is opposite, so it is to the left. Now, if you have the c outside of the parentheses, like f of x minus c, because it's outside of the c, you don't need to do the opposite. It is just directly. So negative c means you're going to go down this many units. And a positive c means you're going to go upwards. If there's a negative in front of the f of x, it means you have to reflect it over the x-axis. So if this is my graph right here with the square root, I will flip it over the x-axis because the x-axis is going from left to right. So if I do the symmetry of this graph, I just flip it over, and this is what it looks like. This is what a negative f of x will look like. Similarly, if I have a negative x, whereas the negative is inside the x with a parenthesis, you reflect about the origin. So if this is my graph for square root of x, here's the y-axis going up and down in a vertical line. I will just mimic this purple graph and just flip it over to make it symmetrical, and that will be reflect about the y-axis. So reflect about the origin is just like when we went over this a few days ago. You will have to reflect it about the x-axis, and then reflect it about the y-axis. So you have to do both. All right, so now what I want you guys to do is pause this video and go ahead and do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Your parent function is going to be square root of x. So take a look at this and then graph all of these. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the answer. So if you take a look at number 1, it's just a regular parent function in purple, starting at 0, 0. For number 2, you have a -3 inside the square root, so that's going to be 3 steps to the right. So go 1, 2, 3, and there's your dark blue graph. Number 3 is in red. It's a +5, which means you have to go to the left 5 units. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's your graph in red. Number 4, it's a -3, but it's outside of the square root, so that just means you can go 3 units down. So from the parent function, you go 1, 2, 3 down, and then you draw your square root. 8, it's positive, means you go up 8. Here's your graph in blue. And then for number 6, since you have a negative on the outside of the square root, it means you need to reflect it about the x-axis. So if the purple is my parent function and I'm reflecting about the x-axis is going from left to right in a horizontal line, this black reflection here is my reflection about the x-axis. And similarly for number 7, you need to reflect about the y-axis, which goes up and down. So if you flip it over from this purple side, it looks like this black graph right here. Example 2. Okay, so the domain of this function, you have to find the domain of this, but before you do the domain of this, you probably want to graph this. So this -1 means you go 1 to the right. You know the parent function of a square root looks like this. So I go 1 to the right, and then here's my graph. So the domain of the function, the domain means all the x values. So you want to look at the left side and the right side of where the graph is going. If I look at the left side, my graph doesn't go any further than just 1. So I'm going to use a bracket to put 1 there because it's including a 1. But if I look at the right side, where is my graph going on the right side? It is going all the way to the right, so that is going to be a positive infinity. And I use a parentheses because positive infinity is not a definite number, so you cannot use a bracket. Now the range of this is going to be up and down. Or actually, I should reverse that. So down and up. So how far down does my graph go with this? Well, if you look at downward, it stops right here at 0. And it doesn't go any further. So bracket on 0. And then I look to see how far up does this graph go. Well, with the arrow, it's going to get higher and higher and higher. So it will be at positive infinity with a parenthesis, like that. Example 3. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and graph the piecewise function. So let's go ahead and graph the first part right here. You could do this in 2 separate graphs and then bring it together, but I just like to do it all at once. So the first one is going to be a line. Your b is at 1, your slope is at -1 over 1. So I start at 1, I go down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1, and I have this line. But I'm not going to be using the entire piece of this line. I'm only going to use a certain piece, and that's where the piecewise function comes in. So there's no equal sign, so it's an open circle at 1. So at 1, open circle. And then because it's eating the number 1 and not the x, you're going to shade to the left side of your graph. So that is the only piece of the graph that I'm going to be using, which means I'm going to be erasing everything else on the right side. Okay, next we're going to go ahead and take a look at the second equation right here. You know that this is going to be a square root function. It's also going to be 1 step to the right. So here at 1, and you're just going to have a graph that looks like this. And again, we're not going to use the entire piece of the graph, so you look at the piecewise function. At 1, it is a closed circle, and you're only going to be using the right side. So technically, that's the entire graph. And that's how you will graph it. Now, in terms of the range and domain, domain is left and right. So if you look at it, this graph is going to continuously go to the left, continues to go to the right. So you can say all real number, or you can go ahead and do negative infinity to positive infinity. But I think all real number is just quicker. With the domain or range, it's up and down. How far down does this graph go? It stops at 0. It doesn't go any further than 0, so it's 0 with a bracket, but it continuously go up further as these arrows extend upward, so your range is going to be positive infinity with a parenthesis. Example 4. That's my little girl saying hello to you guys. All right, so A, you have fog, or f of g of x. So looking at this right here, you're going to be working from the inside out. G of x is cosine x. So you're going to do f of cosine x. So then you're going to go back to the f. Wherever there is an x, you're going to replace that x with cosine x. So it'll be 2 cosine x minus 3. And that's your answer. For B, it's gof, or g of f of x. And you're going to work from the inside out. F of x is going to be 2x minus 3. Now you're going to go back to the g, and wherever you see an x in g, you're going to replace it with the 2x minus 3. So g of 2x minus 3 is cosine 2x minus 3. And that's your answer. Okay, so go ahead and get started on your quizzes. Here's a link to your quizzes. Your homework, complete your math Excel for week 2. Make sure you check in on the YouTube channel so I can mark you guys here. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to seeing you guys on Monday. Take care, you guys.